Welcome to the Explainer. So, have you ever looked around and just wondered why so many young Americans today are completely struggling to buy a home? I mean, you've probably seen it, right? People with great jobs, steady incomes, college degrees, literally doing everything they were told would lead to success, and yet, homeownership feels entirely out of reach. Maybe you know someone in their late 20s or 30s still renting, living with roommates, or even moving back in with their parents. Well, today, we're going to unpack the data together. We'll look at the actual structural barriers keeping an entire generation from the American dream and figure out why building financial security looks so fundamentally different today than it did for previous generations. Let's dive in. To figure out what's really going on here, we have to start by tackling that culturally dominant question you hear almost everywhere. You know the one. Is it simply because young people don't work hard enough? Are they just expecting things to be handed to them? It's a super common narrative, but honestly, it completely dismisses the immense frustration that so many hardworking adults are feeling right now. You hear the specific criticisms all the time, right? The myth that young Americans can't afford a down payment because they're spending way too much money on daily coffee, unnecessary vacations, and endless online shopping. Yep, the infamous avocado toast argument. But mathematically, you'd literally have to skip your daily avocado toast for about 150 years to afford a modern down payment. It's incredibly frustrating to hear, especially when you feel like you're doing everything right. When we actually look at the data, the reality is completely divorced from these personal spending myths. It's not about the coffee. It's just about the math. Okay, so let's break down that math. A decade ago, a standard starter home might have sold for around $200,000. Fast forward to today, that exact same home easily costs $400,000, $500,000, or even more. Now imagine a young worker earning a very respectable $60,000 a year. The problem becomes pretty obvious. Incomes have absolutely not kept pace with housing costs. When starter homes completely dwarf a standard salary, saving up a traditional 20% down payment becomes this moving target that just keeps getting further and further away, no matter how aggressively you try to save. Section 1. The hidden weights, debt and daily inflation. Now, the sticker shock on house prices is really only half the story here. To truly understand the squeeze, we have to talk about the hidden burden of modern education, which is quietly crushing savings accounts before that money ever even gets to a down payment fund. Imagine two people. Worker A starts their career with absolutely zero debt. Worker B, on the other hand, starts out with $40,000 in student loans. Even if both of these workers earn the exact same salary, worker B has a massive chunk of their monthly income automatically siphoned away toward debt payments. And that is the exact money worker A is putting into a high-yield savings account for a house. Over time, that difference grows into a massive chasm. An entire generation entered the workforce carrying tens of thousands of dollars in debt, which automatically put them years behind the starting line. And here's the kicker. For both worker A and worker B, the everyday cost of simply staying alive has skyrocketed. Groceries cost more. Gas costs more. Insurance costs more. Healthcare costs more. Rent costs more. Young Americans are forced to spend significantly more money just to maintain a basic everyday standard of living. When every single mandatory expense inflates like this, the very last thing left in the budget, savings, just gets squeezed out entirely. It's like being on an exhausting treadmill where you have to run faster and faster just to stay in the exact same place. Moving on to Section 2, market forces, rates, supply, and Wall Street. So we've got stagnant wages relative to home prices, student debt, and daily inflation. But what happens when a buyer actually manages to scrape together some savings and enters the market? Well, they run headfirst into massive structural market forces that individual buyers simply cannot control. You see, a lot of people focus solely on the final purchase price of a house. But when it comes to actually keeping a roof over your head, the monthly mortgage payment is what dictates your survival. Let's say you find a house for $400,000. A few years ago, when mortgage rates were at historic lows, the monthly payment on that home was actually relatively affordable for a dual-income couple. But add in today's rising interest rates, the monthly payment on that exact same house with the exact same price tag shoots up by hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars. The buyer's income is the same, the house is the same, but the cost of the debt itself prices previously qualified buyers right out of the market. On top of that, we have a massive supply issue. We are essentially living in a nationwide housing auction. In cities and suburbs all over the country, new home construction simply hasn't kept up with population growth. And you know how it goes. Whenever demand outpaces supply, prices shoot up. If 10 desperate people want the exact same house, they have to compete. Someone offers a little more, the next buyer stretches their budget to offer even more, and suddenly average local buyers get completely priced out of their very own neighborhoods. But wait, it gets tougher. Because you aren't just competing against other families in this auction, you're competing against Wall Street. Large investment companies have aggressively entered the housing market. They have access to massive cash reserves, and they're buying up single-family homes to turn them into permanent rental properties. Think about it. When a regular family trying to use a standard FHA loan has to compete against a multi-billion-dollar investment firm offering thousands over asking price in pure cash, the regular family loses pretty much every single time. Buying a home becomes exponentially more difficult when houses are treated as corporate assets rather than family shelters. Section 3. The generational wealth divide. To really grasp the sheer magnitude of the shift, we kind of have to zoom out and compare the landscape today's adults are navigating to the environment their parents and grandparents faced. A generation or two ago, folks bought homes when housing prices were vastly lower relative to the average income. College costs were lower too, meaning student debt was way less common. Because housing was fundamentally more affordable, previous generations could start building wealth and equity in their 20s and 30s. But today's adults, they're looking at a completely different economic reality. Sky-high housing, exorbitant education costs, and high living expenses mean they're starting from a massive financial deficit. They aren't less responsible, they're just running a race on a much, much steeper incline. You'll sometimes hear older generations say, well, young people just need to save more. And hey, saving is crucial, absolutely. But let's look at the math of a very respectable $70,000 a year salary today. Once you pay current market rent, a car payment, insurance, mandatory student loans, health insurance, and groceries, what's actually left? The down payment fund simply disappears. Working hard, sticking to a strict budget, and saving whatever pennies you can, it's just no longer a guaranteed math equation for homeownership. The prices simply rise faster than the savings account can grow. And we can't just talk about the numbers without talking about the human cost here. Buying a home has always represented stability, right? A long-term investment, a place to plant roots, maybe build a family. When that milestone is ripped away, it creates a profound emotional toll. It generates immense stress and disappointment. We are literally seeing an entire generation altering their life's trajectories because of this. They're delaying marriage, they're postponing having kids, they're renting indefinitely. These aren't just individual financial struggles. This fractures the foundation of entire communities and fundamentally shifts the future of our economy. Section 4. The perfect storm. When we step back and look at all these individual hurdles, we see that young Americans aren't just facing one bad economic policy or one stroke of bad luck. They're facing a structural convergence. So the really crucial point here is this. It's a perfect storm. It's rising home prices intersecting with crippling student loan debt. It's higher everyday living costs clashing with severely limited housing supply. It's regular families fighting off corporate cash competition while just trying to lock in higher mortgage rates. Each one of these 6 challenges would be a massive hurdle completely on its own, but stacked together, they create arguably the toughest, most hostile housing market young Americans have ever faced. It really proves that the affordability crisis is not a personal failing, it is a massive structural barrier. So does this mean homeownership is completely impossible? No, of course not. People still find a way every single year, but the path is undeniably longer, steeper, and way more exhausting than it ever was before. Understanding this really helps explain why so many hardworking people feel completely stuck. So after unpacking all the data and looking at these structural forces, I want to leave you with this to think about. Of all the factors we just explored, what do you believe is the single biggest reason people are struggling to buy a house today? Think about how these forces impact your own community and what it might actually take to finally break this perfect storm. Thanks for exploring this topic with us today.